So you've been rewatching Lord of the Rings and you're like, Legolas, that's who I want to be. That's who I want to play in my fantasy game. Or maybe it's Aragorn. You want to be Strider. Whatever the reason may be, a Warden Ranger is a really fun play style. This is a double bow build, so you use a bow on both bars, and then there'll be some options here. So first up on our front bar, we have our stamina shocks. This is going to be one of our highest, if not our highest DPS ability. We want to make sure that we're casting this every time we can whenever its duration expires. A note about shocks: you cast this, you wait 3 seconds, it goes off, you wait 6 more seconds and it goes off again. You don't want to cast this early because that second proc will not go off. So if anything, wait for it to go off, tick down for a full second, and then cast it if you find that you're casting it too early. But in general, you want to cast it right after it's gone off. So just keep that in mind. It's a little bit tricky to learn to parse with, but you'll get it in time. Next up here is going to be Acid Spray. Acid Spray has a very short duration. It's only 5 seconds. It has some upfront damage, and then it has a short duration. This actually gives us a significant amount of damage, but it's pretty hard to keep up all the time, so keep that in mind. Sometimes our shocks and our Acid Spray will come up at the same time, or we see that they're going to be coming up at the same time. What I would recommend is casting Acid Spray a little bit early, and then recasting shocks once it's gone off the second time. Also of note, if you find yourself running low on stamina, Acid Spray is probably one of the first skills that you would maybe skip a rotation on and just don't cast it for a second, just because it is very expensive. After that, moving on, we have our Spammable. Now in this build, we have 3 different Spammables, which might seem a bit excessive, but there's a reason to use all of them, okay? For single target damage, what I've actually found to be best on this build is going with Cutting Dive. Now, it is within a very small margin of all the other skills, so just keep that in mind. But if you want single target damage, Cutting Dive is what I found to be the best. After that, it's going to be Silver Shards. Silver Shards, the reason you might want to use this is because it'll actually hit 2 other targets near your primary target. So if you're on a fight where you have stuff that you need or want to cleave, then you would go with Silver Shards instead. Places that this would apply: the Ice Dragon and Veteran Sunspire, because you have all the ad phase. If you're not getting through all those ads quickly enough, or if you need help, Silver Shards would work well there. The Triplets in Veteran Halls of Fabrication. You have extra ads in Veteran Asylum Sanctorum, so on and so forth. Basically, if there's several ads that you want to be cleaving and hitting in any given fight, Silver Shards is the way to go. And then our third skill here is going to be Lethal Arrow. So this, you can always use this if you want it. I know it has the flavor of a real bow build, but it does a little bit less damage and it's a little bit harder to weave with. At least I personally find it a little bit harder to weave with, but it does comparable damage. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There is no wrong answer here. I'm just telling you kind of the situation and what I like. I really hate channeled spammables, and so that's why I kind of put this at the bottom here. Even though I know it is more thematically appropriate, I don't care about the theming as much, so I usually go with Cutting Dive. After that, we have Barb Trap. Barb Trap is a great single target dot. You do want to cast it 2 seconds before the duration ticks off, because it does take 2 seconds to arm. 1.5 seconds actually, but usually you cast it 2 seconds before, and that will make sure that it's up 100% of the time. We like this for both the major force and because it's a really great dot, and it also provides us with some passive weapon and spell damage from the Fighter's Guild skill line passives, just like Silver Shards would. I will note, if you want to go full range with this build, all you need to do is just remorph this Barb Trap to the ranged version of it, and then you can throw it. You can cast it from far away, so you can make this a fully ranged build pretty easily. After that, we have Camo Hunter. Camo Hunter we're just using for the passive. We just leave it on our bar. We don't need to cast it. We don't need to do anything else with it. It's just there for the passive. And then for ultimate, we're always going to have our bear up. We're using Wild Guardian, which is the stamina morph of the bear. It does bleed damage. It just does a little bit more than the Magicka morph, so that's why we're using it. There are certain situations where you might need to not use the bear. If you have a big AoE fight or a trash pull, you might want to use something else. In that case, what you do is you slot that AoE that you actually want to cast on your back bar, and then on your front bar you put something like Flawless Dawnbreaker. The reason for that is it gives us Fighter Guild's passives, which will increase our damage on our front bar and just makes it the best thing to do. Now moving on to our back bar, we have Endless Hail. Endless Hail, we're using Maelstrom back bar, so it works well with that arena weapon. Also, you want to make sure you're casting this 2 seconds before the duration expires, because it does take 2 seconds for it to go off. So it's kind of like Barb Trap, where you're going to cast it a little bit early and then wait for it to go off. After that, this is another one of those issues where, like, the best thing and then the thematically appropriate thing. So the best thing to do here is some sort of Magicka ability. I personally really like Degeneration, and the reason I like that is because if you're using Degeneration and Camo Hunter together, you can use cheap trash potions if you want. Okay, so if you're kind of overland, you're in a dungeon, you want to use cheaper potions, it's very beginner friendly to use that. You could put any magicka costing skill here, it would work just fine as well, but you won't get that buff that you get from degeneration. Now, if you want something more thematically appropriate, you're like, Night Hero, I clicked on this build because I wanted a double bow build and I want bow skills. It's a little bit harder to sustain, but poison injection works really well. And we will swap one thing else to help our sustain, but you can totally use poison injection here instead, and it works just fine, and it's a great, appropriate thematic skill for a double bow warden to really make us feel like the ranger that we are with this build. After that, we have our Fetcher Infection. Again, because the stamina sustain can be a little rough on this, I recommend Fetcher Infection, which is the magicka morph. You can use the stamina morph with this. You're going to have stam problems, and so you will have to modify and change things up, but I recommend the magicka morph. The stamina morph does a little bit more AoE damage. The magicka morph does only single target damage, but can be applied to multiple targets. The stamina morph, if you recast it, it'll overwrite it. The other casts will go away. The magicka morph, you can actually dot up each individual target, so it works pretty well. After that, we have Winter's Revenge. So this is just a great kind of staple warden skill, just like our Fetcher is, so that's why we have it on our bar. I know it's not entirely thematically appropriate for this kind of build, so you can replace it if you really just don't like it and you want to stick with the theme of a bow, but it just works really well here. It costs magicka, which is nice, also an AoE ability, so there's just a lot of things going for it, and it does good damage, so that's why we have it here. So Camo Hunter here we have just for the passive. If we just want less skills to cast, we would go with Camo Hunter, and it does basically the same damage, maybe 1 or 2% less damage, very minimal. If you decide to go with Poison Injection on your back bar here instead of Degeneration, you can instead run Bullnetch. The reason for that, Bullnetch will increase your stamina recovery. It will also provide you with those same Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 20%, okay? So if we don't get that from Degeneration, we can actually get it from our Bullnetch, and that means that we can use cheaper potions, which can save us $1. It makes this a very beginner-friendly build. So basically, you decide what skills you want to use, and then that'll determine kind of how you move these 3 or 4 skills around here on the back bar. If you need to heal, you need to put Arctic Blast on. You could switch it with Winter's Revenge if you wanted to, or you could put it here in place of Camo Hunter. If you're already using Bullnetch here, then you would probably want to swap out Winter's Revenge so you could get a heal. If you don't care about using just bow skills, using Degeneration will work well, and then you could still slot the heal in place of Camo Hunter. So it's kind of whatever you want to do on the back bar here, okay, based on what your preferences are. Hopefully that's all clear. Now for a back bar ultimate, of course, if running the bear, you have to put it on both bars, so it would be our Wild Guardian here. If you need an AoE ability, okay, for certain trash fights, you really want big AoEs, you could go with something like Shooting Star from the Mage's Guild skill line. Works really well. You get a bunch of ultimate back. Can be really nice for smaller, grinding or whatever, but you have to unlock Mage's Guild, and that takes a lot, and I feel like that takes too much sometimes. So if you don't want to do that, you could use something like Northern Storms from our class skill line, and it does good damage. Is it quite as good as a Destro ult or Shooting Star or something like that? No, but is it very close? Yes. It works pretty well. So just keep that in mind, that Northern Storm is what you could use here instead, and then you don't have to grind out Mage's Guild. Now moving on to CP, and I plan on doing kind of a CP specific video in the not too distant future, so keep an eye out for that if you want to learn more. But for right now, blue CP, I recommend slotting Biting Aura, Wrathful Strikes, Mastered Arms, and then Exploiter. And the reason for that is they do the most damage. That's why I like them. That's why I recommend him here. For our red CP is very much a choose your own adventure. The only one I would make sure you have on this build is Rejuvenation, because it increases our recovery. After that, Celerity, moving faster in combat is always a good thing. Expert Evasion, a free roll dodge, is always great to have. And then Fortified just increases our armor, which reduces our damage taken. Never a bad thing to have. Now for gear. Of course, we're in a DPS, so all of our gear we want Divines, and then we're going to use the Thief Mundus, and then we're going to put all of our points into Stamina. Okay? So those are kind of set things. Thief Mundus is always best. This is a stamina build, so we put all our points into stamina. And then for gear, all Divines is always the best thing on a DPS. And then after that, for our jewelry, we want Bloodthirsty on all of our jewelry. That'll give us the most damage. And then we want to increase weapon damage enchants on that. All of our gear will be max stamina enchants. And then for our back bar, we have our infused Maelstrom bow with a Berserker enchant, which increases our weapon and spell damage. Again, we're choosing these things because they do the most damage. And then on our front bar, we want a precise bow and then a poison enchant on that. For our sets, I recommend Zaan. For our monster set, you can also use Selene's. Selene's has a bear animation, It's really fun, and it does basically the same damage. It does have some disadvantages. It's only single target, what have you, but it's so thematic and so fun. If you're going for a themed build, you'll hardly lose anything by going with the Selines, and you get the bear, so that's really fun. So I know a lot of people will probably want to do that, but Zaan is probably the best option currently. After that, I'm recommending Pillar of Nirn and then Reliquin. Reliquin is very important that you have that 5 pieces active at all times. Otherwise, you will often drop stacks unless you're parsing really high. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have 5 pieces typically on the body, and that'll make sure you have maximum damage. I will note this is a single target set, so you might want to swap this out for something else. Okay, and if you do, I recommend Whirl of the Depths. Now you want to make sure you have mostly medium and 1 light on your body. So all medium, 1 light on your body. And so just realize, okay, if you're going to be using Whirl of the Depths, that's a light set. So you'll probably want that on your jewelry and weapons, and you can just front bar it, and then you can put Pillar of Nirn on your body. If you're running both Pillar of Nirn and Reliquin, I recommend front barring Pillar of Nirn so that you can keep your Reliquin always active 5 pieces. And it doesn't matter where you put those because they're both medium sets. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions down below. And you can see here I put Reliquin on my body, and then I did Pillar of Nirn, jewelry, and weapons. If you go with Whirl of the Depths, you want to put Pillar of Nirn on your body and put Whirl of the Depths on your jewelry and your front bar weapon. If you don't quite have the Maelstrom bow yet, if you're trying to farm it, you can put anything there. Now, if you're brand new to the game or whatever, and you want a crafted set, I recommend Order's Wrath, and then you can just do something like Hunding's Rage. I would then go farm Pillar of Nirn. You can farm it on normal. You don't need to farm any of this stuff on veteran, and so you can get it fairly early in the game. Pillar of Nirn is a great set. Pair that with Order's Wrath, but until you get something like that, Hunding's Rage is just fine. There are probably a little bit better crafted sets you could use besides Order's Wrath is great, that's best in slot. Hunding's Rage is probably a little bit better set you could choose, but honestly, it's very small and like you're gonna outgrow that set so quickly. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. I will also note if you're new to the game, getting Ring of the Pale Order, which is a mythic, is like putting that on is like the, unkillable. It makes every build unkillable, okay? Because if you do damage while you're solo, you can't use it in groups really, but if you do damage while you're solo, it'll heal you for a percentage of your damage caused, and it's the best and easiest way to farm places like Maelstrom Arena and stuff like that. So just throw that on, and typically what you would do is like drop your monster set or something instead. If you don't have that, make sure you keep heals on your bar. Arctic Blast for the burst heal. You could also use something like Green Lotus or Lotus Blossom as an additional heal that applies whenever you light or heavy attack. So keep that in mind. Or Living Trellis also works very well if you're like in a situation where you're really taking a lot of damage, you find you're dying a lot and you need extra heals. Don't be afraid to throw those things on your bar as well. And just drop one of these dots. It's not a big deal. And I think that is it for this build. I hope you guys enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments down below or come by the That Was in the Wasp Discord. It's linked here on YouTube. You can find it up at the top of the bar if you go to my channel. And feel free to come join us. We have help channels and though people will give you advice based on where you're at. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Post-production Night Horror here. I just want to say a really special thanks to T. They've helped me both with this build and with, you'll see, with the Templar build that will be coming out soon. I appreciate it so much. It's so important to have a really high parse for the thumbnail, and even though I know these builds can do more than what I can do on them, it's just so nice to have someone that can help me out. So I just really appreciate it. T has been really great, and I feel so bad that I didn't record. I was recording a bunch of videos all at the same time, and I miss saying thank you. So I'm so sorry, T. Thank you. It's very much appreciated. Bankero is also someone who's helped me in the past, and if I wasn't doing YouTube, I would normally be a very private person. So I kind of I project that onto other people, and I think actually, and I think in actuality, most people really want they want to be acknowledged for the help that they're giving. So I really do appreciate it. Everybody in the Discord who helps, who says, "Hey, Night Horror, that's wrong," or "I don't think that's right," or everything. I appreciate all of you guys.